Okay, I think we're going to get started. So thank you again for coming to our first training on phenology and our Phenology Trail Monitoring Program. We are going to, so just wanted to outline some of the logistical points about the webinar. So upon, oops, I went to the wrong slide here. Upon entry, all the participants have been muted. So we also ask you to please type all of your questions into the chat box so that Erin can monitor them and answer some questions that arise as they come. Any questions that are not answered in the chat box will be answered by Katie and I at the end of this webinar. And again, we're also recording it so that we can make it available for later viewing on our website and on our YouTube channel. So before we delve in, we'd like to take a minute to introduce ourselves to you. So I'll start. My name is Angie Patterson. I'm the Master Science Educator here at Black Rock Forest. I started working here around 2020, but have been visiting the forest for over 10 years in different capacities, from doing research for my PhD dissertation to instructing classes and coming along for different excursions. So that's me. Katie, want to go next?
Hi, I'm Katie Terlizzi. I'm the research manager here at Black Rock Forest. I've been working here since 2009, so quite a while. I just kind of help all of the researchers who do research here in the forest with logistics and helping out in any way that I can to facilitate the research here. Erin?
Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Collada. I'm the environmental educator and visitor services coordinator here at Black Rock. I've been working here for about 4 years, and I've helped lead groups and develop the volunteer program as a whole over the past year, and looking forward to having everyone come out and get involved.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. So I'd like to outline what we'll be talking about today in order to orient you to the phenology in our monitoring program. So what we're going to do is begin by talking a bit about Black Rock Forest, our mission, and how phenology fits into our mission. Then I'll introduce you to what phenology is, why this phenology monitoring program is a great way to involve public members like you, and how you will be contributing to a larger nationwide project. We'll also be talking about Black Rock Forest phenology records, what seasonal changes we're seeing on a regional and global scale, and why phenology is important. Katie will then show us a map of our phenology trail and go over the expectations of our volunteers. And then she'll describe what phenophases are and the importance of tracking observations correctly. And she'll then give some examples of important phenophases to observe for each plant on our trail. And we'll conclude with how to download and use Nature's Notebook to collect phenology data. So, for many of you, your experience visiting Black Rock Forest has probably comprised of walks, on our trails, enjoying scenic views of our reservoirs or summits, as well as participating in our public hiking events. However, Black Rock Forest offers many more experiences to researchers, school groups, and our public members that's centered around our mission of advancing our understanding of the natural world through scientific observation and through research, education, and conservation. And so, this phenology project actually, reaches all of these aspects of our mission. And we're glad to be able to bring that to you today. So what is phenology? Phenology is actually the study of seasonal timing of natural events, life events in plants and animals, such as flower blooms, leaf out, breeding, migration, and tracking phenological changes in plants and animals requires a lot of data if we want to understand whether or not these life events are changing over time. And that is why this type of monitoring project is great for community or citizen science programs where we get to engage you in the collection and analysis of data relating to the natural world. So our Phenology Trail has been established for about 2 years now, where many student groups of all different ages were able to learn how to tell whether a plant was budding or compare the phenological differences amongst individuals along the trail. And the method for collecting the data, is easy to follow and it's easy to implement with a national framework that's actually already in place. So the data that's collected from our Phenology Trail will actually be submitted to the United States National Phenology Network, which is a database of phenological observations across the country. Other countries have similar programs as well, which provides like these amazing opportunities to analyze trends across species and locations because these data are publicly available and can be used by anyone. Scientific publications using the NPN data actually amounts to over 1,800 publications and growing. So this is a very exciting opportunity for you to contribute data that will actually be used by professional scientists locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, which is the goal of our Phenology Trail Monitoring Program. So, why do we track phenology at Black Rock Forest? Well, we've been tracking certain phenological events for decades and have long-term data sets for things like, such as leaf out of different tree species, the flowering of early spring plants, the return of bird migrants in the spring, the first appearance of butterfly species, and the awakening of certain reptile species. And we are actually seeing, seasonal changes. The graph on the left actually shows the deviation of the length of the growing season, which has deviated from the average by about 12 additional days, which can have large implications for organisms that interact and depend on each other for survival. And this graph on the right shows that fewer rain events leads to fewer cloudy days, which increases the amount of solar radiation, leading to earlier onset of spring. So this kind of data provides more evidence that supports changes in our climate that can affect weather patterns, that can thereby influence seasonal timing, which cues the phenology of organisms. So, what cues phenology in plants and animals? These organisms experience different stimuli, such as day length, temperature, nutrient availability, and other environmental or biological stimuli that prompts these natural life events on a cyclical pattern. And unfortunately, climate change can cause changes in temperature that can decouple the life events between organisms whose life events are dependent on day length, which causes a disruption in the ecological processes, such as insects pollinating and flowers opening, or having food available for animals that were just born. So now Katie will talk about our Phenology Trail in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Angie. So I just wanted to talk a little bit now more about the specifics of the Black Rock Forest Phenology Trail, because Angie did such a great job giving you the background of why phenology is important. So first of all, here is a map of our trail with all of the plants that we will be observing. So it's a 1 mile stretch of trail starting from about the Science Center, which is here. And it goes along our Honey Hill Trail about a mile to Alex Meadow Reservoir. So we're looking at 5 different species. There are 3 individuals of each species for a total of 15 individuals that you'll be making observations of along the trail. So it's going to be a 2-mile walk total, because you'll have to do the mile for the observations and then a mile or so back on the road to get back to your car. And the species we're looking at are whitewood aster, which is this nice little herbaceous flower that you'll see blooming usually late summer. American witch hazel, which is a nice understory large shrub that you'll see. And it flowers, it's one of the strange kind of plants that flowers in late fall, early winter, sometimes even into December. The red maple, which is a nice big tree that is found here in the forest. It's a big canopy tree, one of our more common tree species here in the forest. And then the lovely low bush blueberry that you'll see, which is about a knee-high bush. And then in the, like around July is when you start to see the actual blueberries on the bushes. And then the northern red oak, which is the dominant tree here at Black Rock Forest, comprising probably almost 70% of the basal area of all of the trees. Oh, tried to go to the next one and it wouldn't let me do it. There we go. Sorry. So the observations you're going to be making are pretty simple. And we ask that you try to observe all 15 of these plants if possible. We understand that, sometimes, life happens, things get in the way, or weather can happen, and you might not get to all 15 plants every time you visit, but that is the ideal, is getting to all 15 individuals. And all you're really doing is answering a series of yes/no questions about what you see on these plants. And the way we're going to do that, the preferred method is to use the Nature's Notebook app, which is an app that was developed by the National Phenology Network. But we also do have paper data sheets available, and in an email after this webinar, we will be sending you a whole bunch of information, and one of those things will be that data sheet so that you can print it out yourself if you're more comfortable taking data on paper. And then we ask that you make observations as often as you'd like. If you can get out there every single day, you would be my hero. But ideally, 1 to 2 times a week is what we would like, but a minimum of once a month. And then we're asking that you make observations from March to November. So pretty much a little bit before the growing season starts, all the way to the end of the growing season. And that's because spring usually starts sometime around in April. And it's important with these observations to get a no answer to these questions before you get a yes, so to narrow down the window of that first day that you see that flower open, or the first day that a bud bursts, and things like that. So that's why we start in March. So now that you know what phenology is, a little bit why it's important, and a little bit more about the Black Rock Forest Phenology Trail, we're going to talk about the expectations of our volunteers. And some of this I went over in the last slide, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So first of all, you have to attend this webinar. So that part, check. And then second, you also have to come to the in-person training that we are holding on this Saturday. And that will get you certified to make these observations through Nature's Notebook. And again, we ask that you make these observations from March until November, ideally once or twice a week, minimum once a month, to keep the active volunteer status. We prefer volunteers that are 18 or older. If you are younger than 18, we just ask that an adult accompanies anyone under 18. And I think this actually is a really great thing to do with children. I plan on bringing out my 5- and 3-year-old to help me with some observations. Because like I said, it is relatively simple. For some of the things are a little bit more nuanced, but some of it is just, do you see a flower? And I think, even my 3-year-old, if I'm like, look at these plants, do you see a flower? She could be like, there's one, there's one. So I think it can be a really fun family activity to do as well. then you have to be able to physically hike the 2-mile trail, and you can take as long as you need to do that. If you're okay taking 8 hours to hike to Alec Meadow and back, and you're fine with that, that's totally okay. It is all on your own time, your own pace. However, if you don't think that you're able to hike that 2 miles, but you still really want to make observations, you can contact us about those special circumstances. You might be able to just, observe the first 5 plants every time you come out. Something is better than nothing. Or you could do the first 5, and if you just can't go up and over Honey Hill, but you can make it to Alec Meadow on the road, then you could go that way and maybe do the last 5 plants as well. So, we're definitely willing to work with our volunteers to make it work for everybody. And the last thing that we have to address is the parking. So you will actually be given a special parking pass that says that you are a Phenology Trail volunteer that will allow you to park up in our upper parking lot here. So we've got a bus parking lot over here on the picture on the left. We don't want anyone parking in the bus parking lot. We get really, really busy with school groups, generally April, May, and then end of September through October. So we really need to reserve that for any buses that are coming in. But we can fit, maybe 5 cars, 3 or 4 definitely in this guest lot here. So we would ask that you park there exclusively when you come to make your observations. And if we find your car parked someplace else frequently, then it might result in loss of your parking privileges. So what are we actually observing? We're going to be looking at what are deemed phenophases. And a phenophase is an observable stage or phase in the annual life cycle of a plant or animal that can be defined by a start and end point. So it's basically just things that you see on a plant, like a flower bloom. You can say very definitively, like, there is a flower on this plant, or there is not a flower on this plant, and that flower is open from one point in time to another point in time. So there's this definite window that you see these things, like flowers blooming, leaves emerging, leaves being colored for autumn, or a fruit on a plant. And all we're doing is just saying, yes, that phenophase is present, or no, it is not. So the phenophases we're going to be looking at, I've got the list here. So we've got for initial growth is really only for the whitewood aster. We don't have, I'll also go through some pictures of all of these things so you can kind of start to get an idea of what these things look like. Initial growth is really, really hard to find. A lot of the times it's under the leaf litter, and we don't want to go around disturbing the leaf litter. So that is one, I've never actually seen it. If you do happen to see it, that's amazing, but I wouldn't spend a ton of time looking around for this initial growth for the whitewood aster. The next one that all the rest of them have are breaking leaf buds. So on a plant, there's a bud with scales. It'll have these tight scales, this closed bud, and then all of a sudden, one day you'll be walking on the trail and you'll see that those scales have just begun to separate. And that's what the breaking leaf buds are. And then those leaf buds, eventually a leaf unfurls from it. It'll be a small leaf and it'll grow. So then you can say yes to leaves. And as it's growing, increasing leaf size. And when you say yes to these things, they'll ask these additional questions like, how many buds are there? And what percentage of the canopy space is full with leaves? We'll go over these additional questions a little bit more on Saturday when we're actually walking the trail. And those are completely optional. You don't have to answer them. We really are most interested in whether the phenophase is present or not. But if you want to go the kind of extra mile and do these estimates of how many and percentages, you're more than welcome to do so. So we get leaves in the spring, then eventually we'll get colored leaves in the fall. All of these things flower at slightly different times. We'll talk about that as we go through each individual phenophase. Pollen release, it can be another difficult one to see, especially get a picture of. You're really supposed to like shake the flower and see if it releases pollen when it's when you shake it. Open flowers, so you have a closed flower or a bud, and then it will open. Fruits, so that would be blueberries for the blueberries. Sometimes they're seeds, more like the whitewood aster. Acorns would be the fruit of the oak. Again, we'll go through pictures of those, but I just wanted to make sure that we knew what all of these phenophases were going to be. And then recent fruit drop is really based on your last visit. Are there less fruit or seeds on the plant than the last time you were there? So first we'll go with whitewood aster, as that's the first plant that we'll come across on the trail. This is what the leaves of the whitewood aster look like. They're kind of heart-shaped with a little bit of a jagged edge. And again, when we're out there, I'll show you there's kind of a predefined space. With the whitewood aster, there's more than one individual. There's like a bunch of little plants all in one area. So it's kind of like a 1 meter by 1 meter space that we'll be looking at. So those leaves are actually starting to come out pretty much now. I've seen some when I went to go walk the trail the other day, which was very surprising, but right now they're probably still under snow, so we wouldn't be able to see them. And then you'll start to see flower buds, usually probably maybe starting in June or so. And then they flower by sometime in August. And then a few weeks to a month later, you'll start to see these fruits that kind of almost look like dandelions. They've got those little tufty white things on them that help them as they're wind dispersed. And then the next one we'll come across will be American witch hazel. And its leaf bud is very different than all of the others. It almost kind of just looks like a very small brown naked leaf. And then eventually it does kind of start to expand and turn into these increasing leaf size phenophase. So that one's a little bit more on the difficult side for the breaking leaf bud. We'll take a closer look at that on Saturday, because those buds should be there, and you'll see they're just kind of like these. They don't really have scales like a lot of the other ones do. They're a bit odd, but we can do it. So, and then just like all of the other things, they get leaves, April, May, they increase in size. By October, they're colored leaves. You're going to start to see flower buds probably late summer sometime. The flowers open by usually sometime end of October into November, and sometimes you'll even see the flowers into December. The fruits, I believe, are on the tree, or the shrub, I'm sorry, right now. So last year's flowers are developing, and then the ripe fruits also occur usually towards the end of summer or fall is when they start to release their seeds. Next is red maple. So this has a little bit more of that kind of classic bud that I was talking about. You can see these scales here and how they're starting to separate, and just right in here, you can see that little bit of leaf starting to peek out. So that bud has broken. A few days from this picture, it would start to look like this with these really tiny leaves. So they're starting to grow into these big leaves, and then by fall, they turn color. And then here would be a picture of the flower buds, and the buds of the flowers bloom before the leaves are out on the trees. So the buds will break probably late April, and the flower buds will break and start to have open flowers even by early April. So this would be an example right here. You can start to see the stamens of this flower, so you would actually consider it an open flower, whereas these other ones next to it are just flower buds. But the question is flower or flower buds, and then open flowers is another phenophase. So maples actually have male and female flowers, and we have both male and female plants on our trail. The male flowers have a little bit more yellow. They have the pollen, which is yellow, and the stamens, which have the anthers that are covered in pollen. So you'll see a little bit more yellow to the male flowers, whereas the female flowers are much more red in color. So a male flower will never have fruit. I don't remember which one of them is a male tree, but I believe just one of them is a male tree. And then the females will then develop fruits, which start out, very small, green little things. As they mature, they get a little bit more red like this. And once they're finally ripe, they're brown. And then they'll, a wind will come through, knock them off the twig, and they'll spiral away as the little helicopters that we all have loved as children and still do. You'll start to see the fruits probably sometime maybe in May, and by June, definitely by July, they're all gone. So really you won't have much to observe with the maples from July until September or October, when they start to change color for the fall. Next is blueberry. So similar to all of the others, you have this bud with the scales. It'll open up to the leaves. Eventually there'll be full grown leaves, and then in October or so, they'll change color. Ours don't really get this nice brilliant red in my experience. They usually just kind of turn a little bit more of a pale sickly green, maybe kind of yellow, and then just fall off. We'll start to see flower buds and flowers probably sometime in May, open flowers June, and then the fruits shortly after that, ripe fruits usually at the earliest mid-July, and at the latest early August. And the last one is northern red oak. I think this is a really great picture of a breaking leaf bud. Again, you can see these scales. You can just see this little bit of this leaf peeking out. And eventually we're going to get these small leaves into full-grown leaves, colored leaves in October. And this is probably the flower buds and the open flowers for the oak are probably going to be the most difficult phenophase to observe. So we wanted to try and make sure we got trees that would be producing acorns. And those are usually larger canopy trees. So you might be able to tell that these are very, very small. The flowers, these catkins are, maybe an inch, 2 inches at the most. And so being able to see those when they're 20 feet up in the air is very difficult. So if you have a pair of binoculars, I would highly recommend you bringing them along to see if you can see those flowers on the oaks. We might not ever really be able to know whether they're buds or open flowers. We can do the best we can. If you have some really amazing binoculars, you might be able to see it. If you don't have binoculars, then you can always just, one of the options, so it's yes, no, or question mark. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but you can always just put question mark that you don't know and make a comment like, can't see, too tall. But we also do have binoculars that you can borrow. So if you give us a day's notice, like if you're gonna go for a walk on Thursday, and if you email us Wednesday saying like, hey, I'd really like to borrow a pair of binoculars so I can try and observe those oak trees, then you can just come up to the Science Center and we'll hand them off to you. You can go do your observations, and once you come back, hand them back to us. And they flowered about the same time that their leaves are growing, so that will be probably sometime in late April to mid-May. And then the fruits of the oak tree are acorns, and for the red oaks, this year's acorns are last year's flowers. So the flowers from 2021 would be pollinated and still be growing as acorns, and that's when you might see this kind of underdeveloped acorn. So it is possible that when we go out and look at these trees on Saturday, we might see these little nubbins of an acorn, and then by September, there'll be ripe fruits, and they fall sometime late September, early October. And so the way we collect this data, as I mentioned earlier, preferred is Nature's Notebook, which you can see a screenshot here. If you have an iPhone, it probably looks slightly different. I have an Android phone, so that's what we took the screenshot of. And you can just see really simply, are there breaking leaf buds? Yes, no, or question mark. And there's also an I button here. So you can click that and it'll give you the definition of what a breaking leaf bud is for that plant and some extra information. Similarly with leaves or increasing leaf size, it'll also, for that information button, can tell you the breakdown for the percentages of, is it 20% full or all of those things. So it actually gives you a lot of information on the app, which is really helpful. And your answers are just dependent on your observations as to whether or not you see that phenophase. And if there is just one bud on the entire plant, that's a yes. If there is just one tiny touch of red color on a leaf in the fall, and it's just one leaf and there's a tiny touch of red, yes, there are colored leaves. And then, like I said, if you want to, you can add that additional information and say like, well, yes, there's color, but it's less than 5% of the entire canopy. And then this is what our handwritten data sheet would look like. And we just ask that if you do decide to take your data on paper, that within 48 hours of making your observations, you log on to Nature's Notebook and input the data there. So all the tools that you need if you're going to use the smartphone app is just your phone, maybe some binoculars. We also ask, we're going to be giving you these phenophase definitions. So all of those pictures that I just showed you are from the species profiles that can be found if you look at the New York Phenology Project's website. So we will send along their species profiles for all of these plants to you so you can print those out, bring them along with you. They have a really great definition and they've got the pictures and everything for you for a quick reference. And then, like I said, binoculars are optional, but very helpful for the red oak. And if you want, you could bring a hand lens to get a closer look maybe at the flowers or the buds of some of these flowers. A clipboard if you're using the paper data sheet, and a camera is always really nice to have, especially if you have a question, if you're not sure, you're like, oh, is that a breaking leaf bud? Like I'm not sure, I haven't seen one in real life yet. You can take a picture and send it to Angie, Aaron, or I, and we can get you some more information. So I also just wanted to make sure it's very clear that this negative data, the no data, is just as important as the yes data, because as I had said earlier, we really want to find that window of when these phenophases are present. So it's really important to get when a phenophase is not present as well as when it is present. And if you're not sure, please mark question mark. I would much rather you mark it with a question mark than to input something that's incorrect. So if you don't know, mark question mark, and you can always go back and change it later. So you can, look at other field guides, you can Google things when you get home, you can email Angie, Aaron, or I, you can talk to some of your other volunteers and really try and figure it out. And maybe it will forever be a question mark, and that's okay too. Hand it back to Angie.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so Katie pretty much outlined, how you'll be collecting the data. But first, you're going to want to download Nature's Notebook onto your mobile phone, preferably. It's just nice and lightweight way to go and collect the data. You could probably also download it on your tablet if you like. But feel free to use paper, pencil along the way, and visit the Nature's Notebook website if you want to submit the data that way. So first, you need to visit the Apple App Store or Google Play in order to get this app on your devices. You're going to then want to create an account by entering a username, a password, email address. You'll have to then find Black Rock Forest Phenology Project, which is actually housed under the partner groups box that will be displayed. And you'll find us by expanding the New York Phenology Project drop-down menu and expanding the Environmental Monitoring and Management Alliance group, where you'll find us listed here. You'll then check that off and then proceed to the next steps to kind of complete the process. Eventually, you'll find our Honey Hill Phenology Trail project, where you can then start to add data right away. And don't worry about soaking this all in right now. We'll be sending you instructions in an email after this webinar on how to download the app and get you all set up, and also instructions on how to use the web version if you choose to do that as well. So Katie has kind of reviewed how the data looks on the app version, and this is the Samsung kind of phone version or Android phone version look at it. But I just wanted to outline some, highlight some tips and tricks to think about or consider when you're collecting this data. So you can see here, we have this observe tab where it'll actually display the questions and the plants that's going to be along our Honey Hill Trail. You'll want to visit the site visit details so you can answer those initial questions about snow cover, what time you arrived or made the observations and things like that. And then you're going to want to go back to the plants tab because we currently don't have any animals on our phenology list. So go to the plant tab. The observation date should display the current date that you're visiting. There's a drop-down menu that actually shows all the plants that we have, all 15, and they're labeled, American Witch-haze 1, 2, and 3, and vice versa for all the other plants. They're all displayed in the order that begins from Maley Mills Bridge all the way to Alec Meadow. Okay, so you'll find like the first 5 species, and then as you go along Honey Hill, the second set of species, and then the third as you go to Alec Meadow. So just make sure that if you're starting at Maley Mills Bridge, it would read Whitewood Aster 1. But if you are starting at Alec Meadow, you're going to want to double check that you're starting at the last tree that is there. And you'll have to manually change that on your list. Let's see, you want to mark all the phenophases as no first. So that will clear the form, and then you could go one by one throughout the questions that are asked. Again, mark unsure if you're unsure, and it's okay to do that throughout the season. Again, you may be prompted with additional questions as percentage of leaf out, number of fruits, and don't forget you can press this I button to get those kind of really more specific details on what we're looking for in regards to those observations. Yeah, so you can, after you enter in the data, you can click Save Data and then click Next Plant, or you could just click Next Plant because it automatically saves. You don't have to worry about whether or not you have phone service, because this data will be kept in the app until you move to a place where you do have either Wi-Fi or data cell service, and that data will automatically be uploaded to Nature's Notebooks national database. So you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, so if you're starting again from not from the beginning of the trail, but from the last plant on the trail, you're gonna have to manually change this, enter the data, save the data, and then clicking Next Plant won't work. You're gonna have to go back and go to the plant that's higher on the list. So manually change it. So we just wanted to mention that, every Wednesday, starting next week, we will be walking the trail. Katie, Aaron, or I, we're going to be starting at 10 o'clock, and we welcome you all to walk with us to help, if you need a little bit more one-on-one time to kind of go through some of this training, or if you have specific questions, or if you just want a hiking buddy as you go along this trail. So every Wednesday, we'll be meeting. We will be doing this from March 9th to November 16th, right before hunting season. And after that, the forest will be closed until we restart this, or until hunting season is over. But then we'll be doing a walk with us again the following March. Please RSVP to us by 4 p.m. the day before, by sending an email to both me and Katie, so that we can make sure that we can wait for you if you do choose to come walk with us. And of course, this is all weather dependent, and we're not going to have any makeup dates if we do have to kind of cancel the walk due to inclement weather. Okay, so we are going to end right here. This is our contact information. If you have any questions, again, you're going to be receiving a copy of this presentation in an email, the instructions for Nature's Notebook, how to download it on your mobile phone, but also how to register on the website as well. A map of the Honey Hill Trail, and probably some other paperwork that I'm forgetting at this moment, but we are going to have you fill out a volunteer form for us. Hopefully it'll be put up on our website in time for us to just send you a link, but if not, we will have you read and sign that form when you come to our training on Saturday. Okay. So we are going to take some questions now. I know that we have them in the chat. Let's see. Okay, so we have, right, so the parking on Saturday, yes, there's no visiting groups, like school groups coming, so you can park. We're gonna have you park in the, where the buses usually park, but from now on, after that in-person training, when you come on a individual basis, you'll be asked to park in the guest slot.
Also, in terms of parking, I forgot to mention earlier, if there is a day when we have a whole bunch of school buses coming because we have a large group coming up, especially if it's coach buses, we'll send out an email. So we're going to create an email list for everyone that is a volunteer to kind of keep in touch with you guys. We'll, give updates on what we've been seeing when we go out on our walks, but then also to give you kind of information of like, oh, we've got 4 coach buses coming in at 10 a.m. on Tuesday. You're going to want to avoid that time to, come in and park. Just because if you don't want to be heading down and meet 4 coach buses, you're going to have to back up. We have a 1-lane road coming up to that parking spot. So, you'll see on Saturday, like that's not an ideal situation to meet 4 coach buses on that road, because then it's not that big of a deal to back up. I say that because I drive this road every day, but for somebody who doesn't do it all the time, it might make you a little bit uncomfortable. So it's maybe just best to avoid those times. So we'll send out emails saying like, we're going to have a bus here from probably 9:30 to 10. Don't come during that time, but you can still come from 11 to 1 or something like that. So
real quick, guys, If you have not already typed your full name into the chat, please do so. That way I can make sure I mark you down on the attendance. If not, you will not get credit for attending both of the events, and then I will have to hound you via email. So please do so if you have not done so already. Thank you.
Okay, and if there's any other questions, also you can put that in the chat as well. Again, this presentation is being recorded, and we will be sending you a link to where the Zoom presentation will be posted, probably on our YouTube channel.
Also, if you haven't signed up for Saturday's event, please do so. I know there's some people that signed up for the webinar and not for the in-person training on Saturday. I know some of you can't make it to the in-person training on Saturday, and you've talked to us already. So just please do that. And if you can't, just let us know that you can't, and we'll try and figure something out for you.
I think we might have answered all the questions. You know, we just want to say thank you so much for being a part of this program. We really are excited that, you know, public members and supporters like you want to contribute to science in this way and help support our mission. And yeah, just be able to learn about phenology and become advocates of, you know, environment conservation and preservation, and education research. So thank you so much.